My husband, Ethan Carter, was a scientific genius. Everyone told me I should be a good, supportive wife to him. Not long after I became pregnant, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. For 20 years, I endured everything alone. I took care of his parents until their last breath, raised our son, and helped him get into one of the country's most prestigious universities. My health eventually collapsed, and I died in my early 40s. Everyone said my life had been worth it. Although I felt unwilling and resentful, there was nothing I could do. After all, someone had to bear the burden of it all. But I never expected that Ethan would show up at my funeral. He wore a black suit, his face full of grief, though even that couldn't hide his calm confidence and remarkable poise. It was clear he had lived well over the past 20 years. He gave a moving speech, saying that I was the best woman in the world, and everyone in attendance was deeply touched. I wanted so badly to ask him, if I was truly the best woman in the world, why couldn't you have come to see me just a few days earlier? If you had, at least we could have met one last time while I was still alive. But no matter what I said, he couldn't hear me anymore. Soon after, I learned the reason. During my burial, my son, Ryan Carter, erected my tombstone in his own name. He said, "Mom, you never had much education, but getting recognition from someone like Dad means your life wasn't in vain. Dad sacrificed half his life for you, and for Miss Zhao, who had to hide in the shadows all these years. I didn't want to upset you, so I only met them in secret. Now let your son do one last thing for you. Let them be together openly, both in life and in death." So that was why Ethan had come back, to collect my death certificate so he could finally register his marriage with his longtime lover, Grace Zhao. I watched as he personally bought a large bouquet of fresh flowers and handed them to Grace, who stood beside him with a shy, almost guilty look. "You've suffered enough," he said tenderly. "I'll make it up to you for the rest of our lives." Then my son handed Grace a luxurious brooch and said, "Congratulations on your wedding, Mom Grace. You don't have to hide anymore or endure people's judgment." Suffered? I had spent my entire life like a widow, working myself to exhaustion, struggling through every hardship until it killed me. No one ever said I had suffered, and no one ever gave me a single decent gift. Yet in the end, it seemed like they were the ones who had suffered for my sake, as if they were the victims who had endured everything to make my life easier. A searing flame ignited in my chest, burning so fiercely that even my hollow eyes could not shed a single tear. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself reborn, back to the day before I discovered I was pregnant. "Maya, I don't feel well. Please help me." Ethan's trembling voice came beside my ear. His warm breath brushed across my face as his rough hand fumbled toward me. The moment his palm touched my skin, I shuddered uncontrollably. Instinctively, I raised my hand, wanting nothing more than to slap him hard across the face, kick him to the floor, and stomp on him until he understood what it meant to reap what he'd sown. But just as I lifted my hand, the shock of being reborn snapped me back to my senses. No, I couldn't act recklessly. At this time, Ethan Carter was the prized genius of the entire research institute, the golden boy, the one everyone in the higher departments valued most. If I turned against him now, one word from him would be enough for the security office to lock me in a dark room. Then I wouldn't even be able to step out of the institute's gates, let alone take my revenge. Just like in my previous life, when I refused to marry him, he went straight to the institute's leaders to have them talk sense into me. When the leaders learned that I had dared to reject Ethan, they were furious. "This is a critical period for our research program," they said. "What you're doing shakes morale and helps the enemy." "I think you need to be locked up for a while," the supervisor said coldly. "You need time to reflect on your behavior. Because of you, your whole family is now in trouble. Your work assignment is about to be changed. You'll be sent to a remote forestry station in the mountains." At that moment, Ethan Carter stepped forward again, pretending to be the kind-hearted hero. He begged the institute to show mercy, saying he couldn't bear to see me suffer, nor could he stand watching my whole family be punished because of him. And just like that, everyone turned against me. "Look how decent Ethan is," they said. "He always puts you and your family first. He's capable, responsible, and handsome, so much better than those useless men who drink and beat their wives." Maya, don't be so stubborn. So many girls would give anything to marry him, and he chose you. If you reject him now, you won't just lose your position here, you'll drag your family down with you. Why bring this on yourself? Now that I think back on it, he was clearly the one who caused all my suffering. Yet somehow, he turned himself into the good man in everyone's eyes. But at the time, I was only 20 years old, newly independent from my parents, completely inexperienced in dealing with manipulation like that. Under their constant persuasion and pressure, I gave in without even realizing it. I always believed that, at the very least, he was a gifted scientist, and that he loved me. But it wasn't until after I died that I finally saw the truth. The only reason Ethan was so determined to marry me was because his beloved Grace Zhao, the so-called white moonlight of his life, had left him and gone abroad with another man. In those days, going abroad was almost like being separated by life and death. Devastated and angry, he pursued me, the Institute's so-called beauty, to prove something to himself. The ridiculous part was that shortly after we got our marriage certificate, Grace returned, with just one soft sentence. "I still can't forget you." Ethan fell apart completely. He threw himself back into her arms, desperate to rekindle their old love. They dreamed of being together freely, but Ethan still had 2 aging parents to take care of. So this man, who appeared so honest and decent, came up with a poisonous plan to make me his workhorse, his stand-in wife, the one who would shoulder his filial duties. But he was afraid I might not willingly accept such a fate. That's when he decided to trap me permanently, with a child. The kind of man people called honest often had the most twisted hearts. In my previous life, I knew nothing of this. When I found out I was pregnant, I was even overjoyed, grateful for the new life that had come into the world. Thinking of that now, I bit down hard on my lip, forcing myself to suppress the urge to slap him across the face. My whole body trembled, and the taste of iron filled my mouth. Compared to all the humiliation and pain I had suffered in my previous life, a few slaps were nothing. I couldn't alert him, couldn't make the same mistakes again. At that moment, Ethan buried his face against my neck and shoulder, too lost in his excitement to notice my hand had risen and fallen again in silence. He was trembling with impatience, panting heavily, clumsy in his movements as he reached to turn off the bedside lamp. The scene was exactly like the one in my previous life. Back then, I had thought he turned off the light because he was shy or reserved. Only later did I realize he just wanted the darkness, so he could imagine my face as Grace Zhao's. And now, he was doing it again. This time, I would give him a surprise he would never forget. Just as he was about to move forward, the most crucial moment, I suddenly pressed the switch. The bright light snapped on, flooding the room and shining directly onto his face, flushed with excitement. Completely unprepared, he froze. For a split second, panic and disgust flashed unmistakably in his eyes. Right after that, his whole body deflated like a punctured balloon, completely limp. "What the hell? Why'd you turn on the light?" Ethan snapped in frustration. "Turn it off." Feigning concern, I leaned closer with an innocent look. "Oh no, I must have hit the switch by accident. But, what's wrong with you? Why'd you suddenly lose it? Maybe we should go see a doctor." "See what doctor? I'm fine," he stammered, his face tense. He couldn't possibly admit that the sight of my face under the bright light had startled him so badly that it killed his mood. I looked at him, his flushed face twisted in embarrassment, and said sweetly, "You don't look so good. Are you feeling unwell? If you're not feeling well, don't force yourself. Your health's more important. Why don't you just get some rest?" "I'm fine," he muttered quickly. "Don't move, I'll be ready again soon." He reached impatiently to switch off the lamp again. Ethan had always had a strong desire. When he couldn't get what he wanted, he'd find excuses to pick fights. In my previous life, I had always given in to him unconditionally. Thinking about that now made my teeth ache with anger. He loved Grace Zhao, yet that never stopped him from touching me whenever he pleased, satisfying himself while making sure I'd get pregnant soon, tying me down completely. What a perfect plan. Satisfy his lust and secure control over me at the same time. So much for the so-called honest man. There's no such thing. Men like him, those self-proclaimed bookish introverts, were just the most calculating liars of all. I deliberately glanced downward, my eyes flicking lightly toward the space between his legs, and stopped him just as he reached for the light switch. "Oh my," I said softly. "You call that being ready?" "There's something I've been meaning to say, but I'm not sure if I should. Don't take it the wrong way, okay? You're not an outsider." I tilted my head, pretending to hesitate. "We've been married for a while now, and honestly, except for that little 5-centimeter spot, everything else about me is still like new." I gave him a sympathetic look and added, "You're such a brilliant man, Ethan. Don't overthink it. There are 2 things men can't stand, being cheated on and being told that." Sure enough, Ethan's face turned the color of raw liver in an instant. "Maya, what the hell do you mean by that? Are you mocking me?" "How could I ever mock you?" I blinked innocently, putting on a face of sincerity. "I just mean you always work yourself so hard. It must be exhausting. I'd hate for you to wear yourself out. You're the Institute's top researcher, the pride of the country. You have to take care of yourself, or it'll affect your work." Ethan froze, then let out an angry snort. He jumped off the bed, grabbed his wash basin, and stormed out of the room. We lived in the dormitory assigned by the Research Institute. The washroom and showers were communal. Before long, I heard the sound of rushing water outside. The Institute had stopped providing hot water hours ago. That meant he was taking a cold shower in late autumn. I didn't know if he felt refreshed afterward, but I sure did. It was quite a while before he came back, his body still radiating cold, his hair dripping wet. Without saying a word, he collapsed onto the bed with a heavy thud, his back turned to me. That posture, I knew it too well. It meant, "I'm mad. Come apologize to me. Comfort me." In my previous life, whenever he did that, I would immediately cling to him, apologizing, coaxing, doing everything to soothe his mood. The leaders had made it clear, his emotions directly affected his research progress. As his virtuous wife, I was supposed to keep him calm and focused so he could devote himself entirely to his work. Until later, I had seen with my own eyes how gentle Ethan Carter was with Grace Zhao, how he smiled tenderly, how his eyes softened when she laughed. It was only then that I realized what a complete fool I had been, living my life like a blind, devoted idiot. Now, he was lying there again, waiting for me to bow my head first, just like before. I turned off the light with a sharp click, plunging the room into darkness. He probably thought I was giving in. I could feel him deliberately tossing and turning on the bed, even kicking off the thin blanket, half his body exposed, pretending to sleep restlessly. He must have expected me to do what I always used to do, get up gently, tuck the blanket around him, and fuss over him like a doting wife. Dream on. If anything, I wished he'd catch a cold and be too sick to get out of bed tomorrow. When I didn't move for a long while, he started coughing loudly several times in a row, trying to get my attention. I acted as if I'd just been woken up, mumbling sleepily, "Oh, right, I forgot the weather's changing. I think the radio said it's supposed to get colder tonight." In the dark, I heard Ethan shift slightly. I sat up slowly, opened the wardrobe, and took out a thick quilt. The faint light from the window spilled into the room, enough for me to see him quietly turning onto his back. His lips curved up ever so slightly, so faint most wouldn't notice. He was certain that the Maya he knew, the woman who always put him first, would be taking that quilt to cover him. What a pity. There had been a Maya like that. But she was dead. I acted as if I hadn't seen his expectant eyes and calmly wrapped the quilt tightly around myself instead. The light in his eyes dimmed immediately. His face twisted into a look of hurt and disbelief, but I ignored it completely. All I cared about was wrapping myself up, feeling the warmth seep into my skin. Yet beneath that warmth, a cold bitterness spread through my chest, slowly creeping into every part of my body. The chill made me shiver, and I sneezed. Ethan immediately sat up. "You're catching a cold," he said. "I'll get you some hot water." Well, that was a first. The sun must have risen in the west. He was actually showing concern for me. In my previous life, I had always hidden my illnesses so as not to distract him from his work. Even when I had a fever, I'd grit my teeth and push through it, terrified of making him upset. He had never once asked if I was okay, let alone done anything to help me. That's why later, when I saw him carefully picking out fish bones for Grace, when I saw him gently scoop the chopped scallions out of her soup because she didn't like them, my heart shattered completely. My entire life had been one enormous joke. I had confronted him through tears for the first time. Why do you need your wife to take care of you, but you go out of your way to take care of another woman? I will never forget the look on his face then. The disdain, the irritation, the cruel mockery. All those emotions twisted together into 3 cold, cutting words: "You're not worthy. You, Maya, aren't even worthy to be compared to Grace Zhao. You, Maya, have no right to be jealous of her. You, Maya, should be grateful just to carry my shoes." But why? I had been admitted to a good university on my own merit. It was only because of him, because I got pregnant, and because the institute leaders said, "You must take care of Ethan Carter," that I was denied a recommendation letter and forced to give up my studies. I could have been a rising star too. I gave up everything for him: my future, my pride, my freedom. And all I got in return were 3 ice-cold words: "You're not worthy." The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I didn't even want to look at him anymore. I pulled the blanket over my head and said flatly, "No need, I'm fine. I just need some sleep." I was going to sleep well tonight, to rest and recover my strength, because tomorrow, a real battle awaited me. In my previous life, Grace Zhao had shown up the next day, mocking me, humiliating me, taunting me at every turn. I'd been unprepared, completely defenseless, and ended up enduring her cruelty until I had to swallow my pride and apologize to her. But this time, even if I couldn't destroy those 2 vile lovers just yet, but I would never again swallow that kind of humiliation. Early the next morning, Ethan Carter woke up furious. Clearly he'd been stewing all night. As soon as his eyes opened, he started reaching for me again. That was his routine. I couldn't help but laugh, remembering how the institute leaders once told me, "You should take good care of Ethan's health." Take care of him? After spending a night freezing himself with cold water and cold air, he still had the energy to fool around? What exactly did he need me to take care of? His body was in far better shape than mine ever was. Otherwise, I wouldn't have burned myself out and died in my early 40s while he was still full of life, flying off into the sunset with Grace Zhao. I was thinking about that when Ethan leaned in again. The closer his face came, the stronger the nausea churned in my stomach. I couldn't stop myself from gagging. Still, he didn't get the hint. He actually tried to kiss me, his hands starting to wander. That was it. I couldn't stand it anymore. I shoved his face away with both hands. "Ethan, move! I'm going to throw up!" He froze, realizing this wasn't an excuse. My face must have looked awful because his expression suddenly shifted. "Maya, what's that supposed to mean? Are you still not done with this?" Clearly, he was still stuck on last night, thinking I was just making excuses to reject him again. I didn't bother explaining. He'd find out soon enough why I was feeling sick. When he saw I wasn't apologizing or trying to smooth things over like usual, he got angry. He stomped out of bed, deliberately making as much noise as possible. The sound of him filling the wash basin echoed through the room, followed by a loud clang as he slammed it onto the rack, making it rattle violently. If anyone heard that, they'd probably think someone was hammering metal. And just to top it off, when he finished washing up, he kicked the door open with a loud bang, and didn't even bother to close it. He left it wide open, letting everyone who passed by in the corridor see straight into our room. He thought that would embarrass me, that I'd rush to fix it. But honestly, that saved me the trouble. I'd been planning to open the door myself anyway. I glanced at the clock on the wall. The timing was just about right. I stretched lazily, watching Ethan, his cheeks puffed up like an angry pufferfish. I smiled. "Hey, what's with your face? You look like a blowfish. Don't tell me you caught the mumps?" Ethan slammed the towel down on the table with a loud smack. "You won't let me touch you. You won't even make breakfast. Are you planning to let me go to work hungry?" I deliberately pitched my voice high, mimicking the dramatic tone of the characters in the old radio dramas. "Oh dear Ethan, you're such an educated man. Why is food the only thing on your mind? I heard that's how wolves and dogs act. You're not possessed by one, are you? You wolf-hearted dog." His eyes flared with anger. "Maya, I let last night and this morning slide, but don't push your luck." "Push my luck," I said lightly, glancing down meaningfully at his lower half. Doesn't seem like I could, even if I wanted to. The size difference is a little too big." That did it. His face turned crimson. Maya, I swear I've spoiled you too much, he roared, lunging at me. He pinned me down, forcing himself on me, growling, I'll show you who your man really is. I made a show of resisting, my voice trembling but laced with teasing. Ethan, you're so bad, always in such a hurry. The door isn't even closed yet. Who cares about the door? He snapped, his breath hot and heavy. Let everyone see if they want. You're my wife. My words only fueled him further, so I let out a few breathy, exaggerated moans, feigning embarrassment. And then, crash! A sharp sound of glass shattering exploded from the doorway. Ethan froze mid-movement and turned around. Standing in the doorway was Grace Zhao. A glass bottle shattered at her feet, the fragments glinting in the morning light. In her trembling hand, she still held the handle of a thermos, her knuckles white with shock. The bowl of fruit cocktail and pastries that Grace Zhao had been carrying slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor, scattering in every direction. Glass and syrup splattered across the tiles. Her face went pale as paper, and 2 streams of tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Even from where I lay on the bed, I could clearly see the grief and devastation written all over her face. It was as though she had just witnessed the end of the world. This scene was completely different from the one I remembered in my previous life. Back then, at this exact same moment, Grace had shown up dressed in a spotless white dress, her wavy curls gleaming in the morning sun. She stood at the doorway like some glowing angel, the sunlight forming a golden halo around her. Ethan Carter's eyes had gone wide the instant he saw her. I had just finished pleasing him then. Despite the waves of nausea from my early pregnancy, which I hadn't yet realized at the time. Because I couldn't hide my discomfort, he hadn't been satisfied, and he was sulking, giving me the cold shoulder. Grace had walked in with a bright, charming smile and greeted me sweetly. You must be Maya. Ethan always says you're young and a little naive, but I think he's being too hard on you. Then she turned to Ethan and playfully scolded. Honestly, why are you so short-tempered with other women? Can't you be a little gentler? The moment I heard that, jealousy shot through me like a knife. The neighbors in our building had already warned me. There was a fashionable young woman who had been coming by to see Ethan frequently. They told me to be careful. Grace was staying at the Institute's guest house, and Ethan never missed a single meal there. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, he'd always find an excuse to go. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until midnight. When I tried to talk to him about it to tell him to be more careful, he flew into a rage on the spot. Grace is my college classmate, he snapped. Stop being unreasonable. If you don't have any education, then learn something. Don't act like some petty jealous shrew embarrassing me in public. I had already been furious with Grace Zhao, and now she had the nerve to show up early in the morning, pretending to be kind while spouting those fake, sweetly barbed words. I couldn't take it anymore. I don't need your fake kindness, I told her coldly. You caused all of this, and now you're pretending to play the saint? Grace's eyes filled with tears as she covered her face and ran out sobbing. Ethan didn't even glance at me. He immediately rushed after her. That night, he never came home. The next morning he finally returned, looking exhausted. His expression was solemn as he said, This is all your fault. Grace almost killed herself because of you. I'm the one who's been hurt here. I cried. I never once thought of dying. Why should she? What gives her the right? He glared at me coldly. Not everyone is as twisted as you are. Go and apologize to her right now. If she doesn't forgive you, don't bother coming back. I refused to respond, my anger boiling over. But then he struck where it hurt most. I'll send a telegram to your parents, he threatened, and tell them to come here and set you straight. Back then, for a married woman, to have her parents summoned for discipline was an unbearable disgrace. Everyone would assume she had committed some unforgivable sin. My parents were lifelong teachers, strict, dignified people who valued integrity above all else. They had spent their lives teaching others to stand tall and honorable, and what had I ever done for them? Nothing but bring them endless worry and shame. I couldn't let them suffer humiliation because of me again. So, with no other choice, I went to apologize to Grace Zhao. At the guest house, she was sitting there with her chin tilted high, looking smug enough to scrape the ceiling. I forced myself to whisper, I'm sorry. She stuck a finger in her ear with mock confusion. What? The wind's too loud. I didn't hear you. Ethan was standing beside her, smiling apologetically. She didn't go to college, he explained. She doesn't know any better. Don't take it to heart. My eyes burned with tears. I did get into college, I snapped. One of the best in the country, something most people can only dream of. But because the higher-ups said I had to stay here to take care of you, I was forced to give it up, and now you dare. He said I had no education and wasn't cultured enough for him. When Ethan Carter turned and saw me crying, he frowned impatiently. You made the mistake. You almost drove someone to her death. I'm asking you to apologize, and somehow you're the one who feels wronged? If you're going to apologize, do it properly. What's with that stiff posture? Should I ask your parents to come here and teach you some manners? I never knew that the man who was always so quiet and reserved in front of others could suddenly become so eloquent when scolding me. This so-called honest man had already learned how to control every weakness of mine, every inch of my softest, most vulnerable places, and when I tried to resist, he stabbed at them one by one, each blow perfectly aimed and cutting deep. So I could only bend again and again, bowing my head in humiliation, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over until I lost count of how many times I said it. Finally, Grace Zhao gave a disdainful snort. Ethan, I'll let it go this time, for your sake. I don't bother arguing with an ignorant housewife like her. Ethan immediately turned to comfort her, his tone full of concern. I'm sorry, Grace. You've been wronged. That humiliation stayed with me all the way home. I made up my mind that day. I was going to divorce him. But before I even got back to the dormitory, I started to feel dizzy and sick. I went to the hospital, and the doctor told me I was pregnant. At the time, I thought it must be fate, that maybe God was giving me a reason to stay. I told myself that since I was carrying his child, I should try to live peacefully with Ethan and build a real family. But looking back now, there was never any fate. It was just my own cowardice. Too afraid to fight back, too afraid to raise a child without a father. I simply gave myself an excuse to keep enduring. After being reborn, I carefully reflected on the tragic end of my past life. Yes, those two despicable people were hateful, but my own lack of courage and strategy had also led to my downfall. In this life, I was no longer that naive 20-year-old girl with no support and no experience. 20 years of single-handedly raising a family, enduring loneliness and hardship, had hardened me into steel. I shifted slightly under the blanket, letting my smooth arm peek out just enough, and in a soft, syrupy tone, I greeted, "Good morning, Miss Grace." Grace Zhao and Ethan had gone to college together. She was 6 years older than me. Outwardly, she always criticized me for being young and immature, but deep down, she hated being reminded of our age difference. Sure enough, when she heard me call her Miss Grace, her pale face darkened instantly with a flush of anger. "Who are you calling Miss?" she snapped. I widened my eyes in mock innocence. "Oh, but Ethan told me you're quite a bit older than I am. If Miss isn't right, what should I call you? Aunt? Or maybe, ma'am?" I tilted my head thoughtfully, pretending to consider it, then suddenly let out a bright, amused laugh. "Oh, I see. You prefer being called Miss, don't you?" Grace froze, speechless for a second. Even in that era, the term Miss carried a certain reputation. She had never taken me seriously before. This quiet, seemingly timid little housewife who always spoke softly and kept her head down. In her eyes, I was nothing but a foolish, uneducated country girl. And besides, she had Ethan's affection, or so she thought, which gave her a sense of superiority. She came today without telling Ethan. In her mind, even though she already had him secretly, there was still something missing. The thrill of recognition. She wanted to confront me face to face, to flaunt her victory openly. She had come here arrogantly, full of pride. But the moment she stepped through the door, what she saw stopped her cold. Her so-called lover, the man who had told her countless times he felt nothing for me, was lying on top of me, unable to control himself, desperately taking what he wanted. Before, Ethan Carter had told Grace Zhao that he was only with me out of obligation, just to make sure that when they finally got together in the future, there would be no loose ends. That was why he had reluctantly gotten me pregnant in the first place. Once I was expecting, he had left almost immediately. But what she was seeing now was nothing like that. This time, Ethan wasn't reluctantly doing his duty. He was visibly frustrated, unable to get what he wanted from me, while I had just spent the entire morning teasing him about getting old, and then blamed him by saying it was Ethan who said so. Under that double blow, Grace's beautiful eyes filled with tears. Oh, those tears, so delicate, so pitiful, like raindrops clinging to pear blossoms. Ethan completely panicked. His hands fumbled as he scrambled off me. Grace, it's not what you think. I let out a shaky breath, gasping softly, then spoke in a weak, breathy voice that only made things worse for him. This is all your fault, Ethan. I told you no, but you just wouldn't stop. Where do you get all this energy from? You kept me up all night, and then again this morning. Look, now someone's seen us. How embarrassing. Then I turned to Grace with a knowing, sympathetic expression. Oh, Ms. Zhao, please don't take it to heart. Men are all the same, aren't they? Even male dogs can't help themselves. Grace blinked in disbelief. I continued sweetly, twisting the knife. You know what's funny? I saw a male dog once, right after it had eaten its fill, and when it saw a pile of poop on the roadside, it still couldn't help going over to lick it. Can't be helped, really. It's just in their nature. Some habits can't be changed. For a long moment, both Ethan and Grace stood there, stunned, speechless. It took several seconds before they both snapped out of it, only to explode at the same time. Ethan roared. Maya, who the hell are you calling a dog? Grace shouted right after. And who are you calling poop? I blinked innocently. Oh, I was just giving an example. Why are you two so eager to claim the parts? That did it. They both lost it completely. Grace turned crimson, clutched her face, and ran out of the room in tears. Ethan's face went dark as thunder as he stormed after her. Meanwhile, I lay back in bed comfortably, smiling in satisfaction, and called toward the door. Miss Zhao, aren't you staying for breakfast? As soon as the two of them left, I climbed out of bed. Knowing Ethan's prideful nature, I was certain he'd go straight to Grace to beg for forgiveness, probably groveling at her feet. And once he came back, he'd definitely take out all his frustration on me, even more viciously than before. In my previous life, he'd had the entire research institute behind him, and I could only endure in silence. But not this time. I had spent the whole night analyzing everything I remembered from my last life, every mistake, every humiliation, and I had finally come up with a flawless plan. The thought steadied me. After washing up, I deliberately skipped breakfast. I dusted a light layer of powder over my face, making my complexion look even paler. Then, clutching my stomach with one hand and holding onto the stair rail with the other, I began descending slowly, one weak step at a time. It was rush hour. The hallway was crowded with people heading to work. When my colleagues saw me looking so frail, they all stopped, concern written across their faces. Maya, are you all right? One of them asked. You don't look well. Maybe you should go to the hospital? Yeah, take the day off, another said kindly. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the respected Director Chen, the elderly head of the institute, walking a few paces behind me. I forced a weak smile and said softly to the others, I'm fine, really. It's just a bit of stomach pain. This is a critical time for our research project. I can't let personal matters delay everyone's work. Director Chen quickened his steps, frowning. Nonsense, he scolded. Look at you. Your face is white as a sheet. Go see a doctor right now. He glanced around quietly, then lowered his voice and asked, Where's Ethan? Where's Researcher Carter? Director Chen asked sharply. Someone nearby replied, He's probably in the lab. He's always the earliest to arrive. But another person quickly added, I just passed by the lab, the door was locked. Director Chen's frown deepened, he turned to me. Maya, where did Ethan go? In those days, everyone's daily routine was simple. Home, the cafeteria, and the lab. Those were the only 3 places people ever went. If he wasn't in any of them, that was very suspicious. I opened my mouth like I wanted to say something, then hesitated, lowering my head instead. My lips pressed tightly together as I forced a look of quiet endurance, as though I were suffering something unbearable, but was still determined to hold it in for the greater good. Director Chen was no fool. The moment he saw the subtle play of emotions on my face, he understood immediately. He called for Chief Zhao from the security department, a stern, decisive ex-soldier known for his no-nonsense attitude. Within minutes, Chief Zhao arrived with his team and began searching the institute grounds. It didn't take long for them to find the pair of traitors in the grove behind the research compound. There was Grace Zhao, crying helplessly in Ethan Carter's arms, tears streaming down her face like a tragic heroine. Ethan held her tightly, whispering soft words of comfort, their posture intimate and unmistakable. Even Chief Zhao, who had seen all kinds of chaos during his years in internal security, stood there dumbfounded. In his eyes, anyone in the world could be a scoundrel, except Ethan Carter. To him, Ethan was the definition of an honest, upright man. And not just him. In my previous life, almost everyone believed that. So whenever I complained, they'd tell me, "Maya, what are you so unhappy about? You married a brilliant, dependable man. He's a good, honest person doing important work." If I showed even a hint of dissatisfaction, they said I was bullying an honest man. If I resisted in any way, they said I was selfish, disrupting the Institute's harmony. But now they were seeing with their own eyes what kind of honest man he truly was. I wondered if any of them would still tell me to be generous after this. Chief Zhao was the first to recover from the shock. His voice boomed across the grove. "Hey, what do you think you're doing in broad daylight? Acting like a couple of hooligans?" The two of them jumped in fright, jerking apart immediately. Grace's face drained of color, and Ethan froze where he stood, panic flickering in his eyes. What are you doing here?" When Ethan saw Chief Zhao's stern, unyielding face, the kind that reminded people of a judge unmoved by pleas, he went pale, like a rat caught by a cat. To be fair, his shock made sense. This time of day was when the Research Institute was at its busiest. Everyone was supposed to be at their posts, immersed in work. Ethan had his own private lab, and usually, no one paid attention to his whereabouts. If Director Chen hadn't run into me by chance that morning, and then ordered Chief Zhao to go find him, no one would have thought to search the back hill. They could have stayed hidden there all day without being discovered. Ethan's face changed several times in quick succession before he forced himself to appear calm. "Chief Zhao," he said stiffly, "Grace and I are old college classmates. My wife, Maya, said some harsh things to her this morning that hurt her feelings. I just came here to apologize and clear up the misunderstanding." Chief Zhao, righteous to the core, snorted coldly. "Save it, Researcher Carter. The Institute values you. Don't let yourself be led astray by some shady woman trying to seduce you." Grace's expression darkened instantly. She'd always been proud and vain. No one had ever dared insult her like that. She jabbed a trembling finger toward Chief Zhao's face and shouted furiously, "You're the hooligan. You and your whole family are hooligans." She thought everyone would indulge her the way Ethan Carter always did, without limits, without consequence. But unfortunately for her, Chief Zhao only recognized two kinds of people in this world: our people and the enemy. And Ethan was officially listed as a key protected asset of the Institute. With a wave of his hand, Chief Zhao ordered his men forward. "Restrain her." Grace Zhao screamed and tried to fight back, but she was no match for several strong security officers. Within seconds, her wrists were twisted behind her back, red marks blooming across her pale skin. I should mention, Chief Zhao was famous for his no-nonsense attitude. He didn't care if the person in question was male or female. When he handled things, he didn't know the meaning of pity or gentleness. The more Grace struggled, the tighter they restrained her. She cried out again and again in pain, but he remained completely unmoved. Then, his voice cut through the air like a knife. "Sneaking around our institute, trying to confuse one of our top researchers. I think you're a spy sent by the enemy." His words landed like a bucket of ice water. Grace and Ethan froze instantly, their faces draining of color. In this era, being accused of espionage wasn't something you could talk your way out of. Even if it didn't cost you your life, it could destroy you completely. And Chief Zhao, in his position, practically was the embodiment of political authority. In an instant, both of them crumbled. Their defiance vanished. They bowed and scraped, stammering apologies and explanations, trying desperately to plead their innocence. From where I stood a short distance away, watching them bend and grovel, I felt a strange mix of emotions. So they could bow their heads after all. When Chief Zhao finally felt they'd been frightened enough, he straightened and spoke sternly. "Researcher Carter, we'll discuss this back at the Institute. For now, you're both coming with us." The final decision will be made by the leadership. He knew Ethan's research was tied directly to the Institute's most critical project. The higher-ups wouldn't want anything jeopardizing it, so he decided to bring them back first and leave the punishment to superiors. Ethan and Grace both let out a shaky breath of relief and slowly stood upright. But as soon as they did, their eyes met mine. I smiled at Grace, brightly, triumphantly. It was a deliberate, dazzling smile meant to taunt her, to remind her she'd lost. Grace had always thought I was weak and easy to bully, someone who cared too much about appearances to fight back. She had never imagined she'd be humiliated in front of me. Seeing me standing there, chin lifted and eyes gleaming with victory, she completely lost control. "You," she screamed, pointing straight at me. "You brought them here. You told them lies about us." Ethan turned on me too, fury written across his face. "Maya, you've really disappointed me." Even now, he thought I was still the same woman who used to follow him blindly, worshipping the ground he walked on. Well, I couldn't let him down, could I? So I hunched my shoulders slightly, letting my voice tremble as I lowered my head, pretending to hold back tears. I sniffled softly, looking every bit the fragile, misunderstood wife. Seeing that I didn't argue back, Grace grew even bolder. "You're filthy inside," she hissed. "That's why you see filth in everyone else. Ethan and I are completely innocent classmates. How dare you slander us?" She stepped closer with each word, jabbing her finger toward my face until it was almost touching my forehead. I matched her steps in retreat, letting my expression turn frightened and helpless. Then, as if by accident, I stumbled backward and fell hard to the ground. From where everyone else stood behind us, the scene looked unmistakable. Grace Zhao towering over me, her hands still raised, while I sat on the floor looking terrified. To anyone watching, it seemed like she had just shoved me. Chief Zhao's patience snapped. His voice thundered through the corridor. "You've got no shame whatsoever." He turned to his men. "Come here. From start to finish, Comrade Maya has done nothing wrong." "I never said a single bad word about either of you," Chief Zhao declared firmly. Ethan Carter froze, glancing toward him as if to confirm. "You mean, it wasn't her who reported us?" But before anyone could say more, a gasp rang out from the crowd. "Maya, what's wrong?" I was curled up on the ground, both hands clutching my stomach, my face twisted in pain. I had deliberately worn a light-colored skirt that morning, and now a bright, alarming red was slowly spreading beneath the hem, seeping into the fabric. Chief Zhao's expression changed instantly. "Oh no!" he shouted. "Comrade Maya said she wasn't feeling well this morning. Her face was white as paper. The director told her to go to the hospital, but she insisted on staying. Looks like it's really serious." Ethan finally came to his senses. Panic flashed across his face as he rushed over to me. "Maya, what's happening? Are you okay?" Two perfectly timed tears slid down my cheeks as I whispered weakly, "Ethan, I think I might be pregnant. I've been feeling nauseous all morning." Chief Zhao's eyes widened. "Damn it," he barked. "She's probably having a miscarriage. Get her to the hospital now." Then he turned on Grace Zhao, his expression sharp and cold. "If anything happens to researcher Carter's child today, you'll be held responsible." "Why should I be?" Grace screamed hysterically. She fell on her own. But her words only made it worse. Everyone standing there, scientists, assistants, technicians, looked at her with open condemnation. They had all seen what happened. From their angle, it looked exactly like she'd shoved me to the ground. Her face flushed scarlet as she tried to defend herself, but no one believed her. Even Ethan, for the first time, looked at her with disappointment and suspicion. "You don't believe me either?" she shouted, her voice breaking. Lying on the floor, I drew in a shaky breath and spoke faintly. "Don't blame her, Ethan. She didn't mean to push me." That was all it took. His anger melted into panic and guilt. "Don't talk," he said softly, almost tenderly. "Just rest. I'll take you to the hospital right now." Seeing that, Grace completely lost control. She no longer cared about her image or the people watching. She pointed at me, her voice shrill and cracking. "You bitch! Stop pretending. You're faking all of this. You're lying about everything." But people don't lose their composure because they're born vulgar. It happens when they're cornered, when their pain has nowhere left to go. Even so, the sight of her shrieking and shaking, her face twisted with rage, shocked everyone present. It was the first time Ethan had ever seen her like that, and his expression shifted. Anger, disbelief, confusion, all tangled into one. Even Grace seemed startled by the look in his eyes. Moments later, the group rushed me to the hospital. Grace was taken back to the institute by the security department for interrogation and isolation. Outside the emergency room, Ethan paced back and forth, his face pale, his hands trembling. The moment the doctor came out, he rushed forward. "Doctor, how's my wife?" The doctor pulled down his mask and sighed regretfully. "I'm sorry. The pregnancy was still very early and the fetus was unstable. Combined with emotional distress and external trauma, we couldn't save the baby." Ethan froze. His body stiffened, his face blank, as though the world had stopped moving around him. Inside the hospital room, I heard the news and covered my face, crying so hard my chest hurt. No one knew how difficult this decision had been. I thought of my son from my previous life, his tiny arms wrapped around my neck, his soft voice calling me Mom. My heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand, squeezed until I couldn't breathe. But then I remembered how my son had stood before my grave, rambling tearfully as he praised his father. The same man who had abandoned us. "Mom," he'd said, "Dad gave you all his wages for so many years. It wasn't easy for him to support our whole family all by himself. If your spirit is watching over us, please bless Dad and Aunt Grace." Even as a ghost, the anger nearly burned through what was left of me. That man, his father, hadn't given me a single penny, not once. But back then my son missed his father so much. He would look at me with those sad, innocent eyes and ask softly, "Mom, does Dad not love me anymore?" How could I bear to tell him the truth? Seeing him so small and helpless, I couldn't bring myself to break his heart. So I told him a kind lie, that his father loved him very, very much, but he was away on a secret mission, so important he couldn't come home. I said his father sent back every cent of his salary to support us. And every year on his birthday, I would buy him exactly what he wanted, wrapping the gifts carefully and saying they were from his dad. I thought I had played the part too well. That's why my son never noticed the truth. But thinking back now, that wasn't it at all. Every gift I gave him was chosen based on what he truly needed or wished for. How could his father, who was never there, have known those things? The truth was, my son had secretly been in contact with his father for a long time. And that man's money? It was all spent on Grace Zhao and the daughter they had together. Not a single coin was ever used for our child. Every meal, every school fee, every necessity came from my paycheck. Money I earned through exhaustion and humiliation, poured entirely into supporting the Carter family's elders and children. By the time I died, I was still wearing clothes I had bought more than 10 years earlier. The fabric faded to pale white. Meanwhile, his father lived comfortably, polished and well-dressed. The contrast between our lives couldn't have been more obvious. Did my son truly not see it? No, he saw it. He just didn't want to. In his heart, his father and Aunt Grace were the ones who were elegant, refined, and warm. Unlike me, strict, tired, always pushing him to do better. Grace knew how to coax him, how to make him smile. Once his heart tilted toward them, his eyes went blind to everything else. He chose to see them as good, and me as the bitter one. I could still hear him calling my enemy, Mom Grace, still remember how he used his savings to buy that woman a luxury brooch as a wedding gift. And my birthday? He couldn't even bring himself to say happy birthday. He thought I was uneducated, that I didn't understand rituals or sentiment. He thought I wasn't worthy of affection or celebration, just a beast of burden meant to work and sacrifice for the Carter family until the very end. And on top of that, at my own funeral, he had stood there with tears in his eyes, saying that I had made him suffer. He said he had endured all those years, silently sacrificing, only because he didn't want to upset me. If my bringing him into this world caused him so much pain, then perhaps I shouldn't have brought him here at all. That morning, right after Ethan had chased Grace out the door, I quietly went into the kitchen and drank a bowl of concentrated saffron water. It had been sent to me by my mother long ago to help with menstrual cramps. I never thought I'd end up using it like this. The choice was my own, but God, it hurt. When the doctor told me the baby couldn't be saved, I covered my face and sobbed like my soul was being torn apart. I had thought I could perform this act coldly without emotion. But in that moment, I felt a pain I hadn't expected. Raw, searing, heartbreakingly real. It wasn't just for the unborn child I would never meet. It was also for the tragic, bitter woman I had been in my past life. When I was discharged from the hospital, Ethan Carter came to pick me up. With him were his parents. He said they were there to help take care of me during my recovery. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh inside. His parents weren't any better. In my previous life, they had also come to take care of me just before I gave birth to my son. Or at least, that's what they claimed. They said they were there to help me recover after childbirth. But in truth, they never cared for me a single day. During my confinement, they pretended not to know what kind of food I liked, so they fed me the same bland cabbage soup every day. I became malnourished and couldn't produce milk for the baby. Behind my back, they mocked me for being a useless mother who was starving their precious grandson. I was timid and naive then. I didn't dare defend myself. I would just curl up under the blanket, silently crying, terrified that someone might hear me and think I was making trouble for Ethan Carter. For 20 years, I took care of his family. I buried his parents with my own hands. When his mother became paralyzed for nearly a decade, I tended to her day and night until she died. She never even developed a single bedsore under my care. And yet, those people, who knew perfectly well that Ethan had another woman and another family outside, never told me a thing. They even met with him behind my back, pretending to be innocent. They didn't want to burden their successful son, so they shamelessly stayed with me, living off my labor, draining every drop of my energy and blood without guilt. And my son, he had once loved me deeply too. So when did that change? It began the moment his grandparents moved in. Day after day, they whispered to him, "Your mom is useless. Your mom isn't educated. Your dad's the capable one. He's the one working hard to support this family." Over time, my son started pulling away from me. He began idolizing the man who had never fulfilled a single day of responsibility as his father. And Grace Zhao, the woman his father cherished and protected like treasure, she naturally became someone my son longed to please and be close to. Half of the distance between me and my son in my past life was caused by those two old people. And now that they had come to me again, I had no intention of letting them off easily. When Ethan brought me back to the dorm that day, he was cautious, almost gentle. "Maya, don't be too sad," he said softly. "We'll have another child someday." I sniffled, my voice thick with grief and bitterness. "But it won't be this child. This one died unjustly. Grace Zhao killed my baby. Where is she?" He hesitated, his eyes shifting away from mine. "Grace, she didn't mean to. I've already forgiven her on your behalf." I snapped my head toward him, staring coldly. I had thought my heart was already made of stone, but those words pierced straight through me. "How dare you?" I hissed. "Who gave you the right to forgive her for me? My baby is gone. You think saying she didn't mean it makes it better?" He looked uncomfortable, trying to justify himself. "The investigation's over. She's not being charged as an enemy agent. I know you don't want to see her right now, so..." I sent her back to her hometown for a while. That was it. My composure finally broke. I shouted through my tears, "Ethan Carter, are you even human? That woman killed your own child and you just let her go? She doesn't even have to face me, doesn't have to say one word of apology." Then my voice hardened, trembling with fury. "You either bring her back here to kneel and apologize, or we're done. I want a divorce." "Divorce?" He grabbed my hand, his voice rising. "Don't say that. You're just upset right now." Then, in a slow, deliberate tone that reeked of condescension, he added, "I won't divorce you, Maya. Not in this lifetime." He thought I was just throwing a tantrum, that deep down, I still loved him. But what he didn't realize was that my love for him had already died, buried with the child he so easily forgave someone else for killing. The moment he said he couldn't live without me, the fire in my chest exploded. All the hatred I had buried for 2 lifetimes erupted at once. With every ounce of strength I had, I swung my hand and slapped Ethan Carter hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the room. His head snapped violently to the side, and 5 red fingerprints immediately bloomed across his cheek. His mother, who had been standing nearby, screeched in outrage. "If the child wasn't born, it just means you weren't destined to have one. That baby was a debt collector from a past life. Good riddance. Losing it is a blessing. What are you crying about?" I lost control. I lunged at her, clawing at her face with my nails, my voice hoarse and trembling with fury. Is that how a human being talks? My baby just died, and you call that a blessing? You call my child a debt collector? I screamed until my throat burned. The entire residential compound heard the commotion. People didn't dare comment openly, but behind closed doors they whispered. The Carter family is too cruel, they said. And that Grace Zhao woman, what a shameless homewrecker. Public opinion was on my side, but unfortunately, the institute couldn't afford to lose Ethan's research. Eventually, the old director Chen came personally to my dorm. He stood at my door, his face grave yet kind. Comrade Maya, he said gently, I know you're a good woman, and I know you've suffered, but Ethan's work is at a critical stage. Can you set aside personal matters just for now? Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him. My voice trembled. How can I let it go, Director Chen? Tell me, how am I supposed to let it go? When you told me Ethan was an honest man and encouraged me to marry him, I listened. I trusted you. But look at what's happened. He's been openly embracing another woman, right under everyone's eyes. That woman killed my baby, and instead of holding her accountable, everyone protects her and tells me to endure it. Why is it always me who has to endure? What did I ever do wrong? My voice cracked as I broke down completely, sobbing until I could barely breathe. The director's face was full of guilt. He sighed heavily, clearly torn. What do you want to do then? He finally asked. Director Chen, I said quietly, wiping my tears. I've always respected you. When you told me to marry him, I didn't hesitate. But now it's clear. Forced love never lasts. Everyone saw what happened that day. Ethan and Grace Zhao are the real pair. If they care for each other that much, then please approve our divorce. Let them be together. Maybe that way, Ethan can finally focus on his research without distraction. He looked at me long and hard, sympathy etched into every line of his face. Finally, he nodded slowly. But I never expected that the real obstacle to the divorce would come from Ethan himself. Something in him snapped. He was suddenly unwilling to let go. He began acting as though he were a changed man. Every day he knelt before me, apologizing, saying he had lost his mind, begging me for forgiveness and another chance. He even slapped himself in front of me, over and over. His parents, once so arrogant, now behaved like frightened mice, silent, careful, barely daring to breathe around me. But I was unmoved. I was no longer the naive girl who used to believe whatever others told her. Still, I couldn't help but find it strange. In my previous life, Ethan and Grace had loved each other so desperately, so passionately that they destroyed me for it. But now that I had offered them freedom, he didn't want it. After thinking it through, I realized there was only one explanation. People always crave what they can't have. Back then, I was easy to get, so he never cherished me. Now that I was the one determined to leave, I had somehow become the unattainable red mark on Ethan Carter's heart. The obsession he couldn't let go of. But I didn't have time to waste on him anymore. The university semester was about to start, and I needed to finalize the divorce and get my transfer papers before then. If I missed the registration date, the institute would have even more reason to keep me trapped here. Ethan, however, showed a level of patience that bordered on insanity. Even after being scolded, hit, and humiliated, he still refused to agree to a divorce. His parents, who had once believed their son to be a brilliant researcher and thought they'd come here to enjoy a comfortable life, found themselves waiting on me like servants instead. Fetching, cleaning, and constantly watching my expression in fear that one wrong word would set me off again. Eventually, the two of them couldn't bear it any longer. They made up some flimsy excuse and slipped away, tails between their legs, back to their hometown. But this stalemate couldn't continue. So I came up with a plan. Through a colleague who was supposedly returning to Grace Zhao's hometown to visit family, I deliberately leaked some exaggerated gossip, painting a vivid picture of how Ethan was now acting like a love-struck fool, groveling and begging me to stay. When Ethan had sent Grace away earlier, he claimed it was for her own good, to protect her from harm. And Grace, full of confidence in her place in his heart, had obediently stayed behind, waiting for him to finalize the divorce and come back for her so they could finally be together. So when she heard the rumor that Ethan was now clinging to me, confessing and repenting like a man possessed, her first reaction was disbelief. but a woman's intuition is sharper than reason. Despite her doubts, Grace couldn't resist sneaking back to the research institute to see for herself. When she arrived, she happened to catch sight of Ethan standing beside me, gently tugging at my sleeve, speaking in a pleading voice. "Maya," he said, "I really can't divorce you. What happened with Grace was a moment of weakness. My heart belongs to you." From outside the window, Grace's face turned an ugly shade of green. But this time, she was smarter. She didn't burst in immediately. She waited. The next day, she confronted Ethan directly. They met in the grove behind the dormitory buildings, where their argument erupted like a thunderstorm. "Grace, listen to me," Ethan tried to explain, his voice low and desperate. "This is just temporary. Once she has another child, she'll calm down. Then I can take better care of my parents. After that, we can finally be together, without any worries." Grace's voice was sharp and dripping with fury. "So you want her to have another child? Just to keep her chained to you? How long will that take? A year? 2? Don't kid yourself. That's just another excuse. You can't bear to leave her, that's the truth." Her tone rose, full of spite. "Don't forget, Ethan. I know every inch of your body. If you don't end this marriage right now, I'll go straight to the higher authorities and report you for moral misconduct. I'll tell them you've been playing with women's lives. Let's see who saves your career then." In that era, moral misconduct was enough to destroy a person completely. Ethan fell silent. He hesitated, torn between his career and his so-called love. After struggling for a long time, he finally gave a bitter nod of surrender. The next day, he came to me looking like a ghost. His eyes were sunken, dark circles heavy beneath them, his hair disheveled. He handed me a divorce application already signed with his name. "Maya," he said quietly, "listen to me. This is just a fake divorce. Wait for me, okay? Once I settle things with Grace, I'll come back. I promise we'll remarry." I looked at him as if he were the most pathetic fool on earth. Where did this man get the confidence to think I'd ever wait for him again? Still, I didn't bother arguing. The only thing that mattered now was getting that divorce certificate as fast as possible. There were less than 2 weeks left before the semester began. And my new life with it. I had to report to the university soon. If I shattered Ethan Carter's fantasy now, if I told him flat out that I would never wait for him, he might lose control and refuse the divorce altogether. I couldn't risk pushing him too hard. I needed to give him hope, and the greater that hope was, the deeper his disappointment would cut later. A man like him deserved the cruelest punishment this world could offer, the kind that stripped his pride and hollowed his heart. So I lowered my gaze and spoke softly, my tone warm but tinged with helplessness. "I understand your situation. If there really comes a day when we can remarry, that would of course be wonderful." At those words, his face lit up. He eagerly reached out to hold my hand, but I quickly dodged under the pretense of reaching for my pen to sign the papers. The day after we received our divorce certificate, Grace Zhao couldn't wait any longer. She dragged Ethan to the registry office and got their marriage certificate. In my previous life, I'd thought that his greatest wish had been to give Grace an official title, to make her his lawful wife. He was so obsessed with that idea that he hadn't even waited 2 days after my death before rushing to register their marriage. By the 3rd day, they had already tied the knot. This time, he finally got what he'd wanted ahead of schedule. He should have been overjoyed, right? But that very same night, he came knocking on my dormitory door. "Maya," he said, standing in the doorway with solemn eyes. I meant every word I said. "I'll come back for you. I promise I'll remarry you." I stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of his twisted logic. Then a phrase floated into my mind. "The unattainable is always stirring. The favored are always fearless." In my past life, I had been the one trapped in the palm of his hand. That's why he'd felt so secure, so fearless in using me, in hurting me, knowing I would never leave. And yet, whether in my past life or this one, he was always restless, always obsessed with the one thing he couldn't have. What do you even call a man like that? There was only one word that fit. Pathetic. After Ethan and Grace registered their marriage, I went straight to Director Chen the very next day to request my university transfer papers. Back when I was first accepted, the institute had hidden my admission for the sake of Ethan's research. They claimed it was better for me to stay home and support him, especially since I was pregnant at the time. But now, with no husband and no child, there was nothing left to hold me back. The director stamped my paperwork without hesitation. As he handed the documents to me, he sighed and patted my shoulder gently. "Maya, you've been a good comrade," he said softly. "You've suffered a lot over the years." That phrase, "you've suffered enough," had haunted me my entire past life. I'd ached for someone to say it, to acknowledge my pain. And now that I finally heard it, I felt nothing. No tears, no relief, just an empty calm, like the still surface of dead water. It was like a child who once begged for candy, only to grow old without ever tasting sweetness. By the time someone finally offers it, all the flavor in the world feels sickeningly hollow. I thanked Director Chen sincerely and threw myself into preparing to leave the research institute and report to the university. Meanwhile, Ethan and Grace wasted no time hosting their wedding ceremony. Just like in my previous life, his parents came rushing from their hometown, beaming with pride and self-importance. I could almost see the smug satisfaction on their faces. They thought they could manipulate Grace the same way they had controlled me. The moment Ethan's mother stepped through the door, she placed one hand on her waist, pointed to the only south-facing room, and said, "Grace, your father and I are old. Our bodies aren't what they used to be. We'll need to stay in that south room. The sunlight's good for our health." Grace was sitting at her vanity, drawing her eyebrows. Upon hearing this, she let out a short, derisive laugh through her nose. "If sunlight's so good," she said with a smirk, "then maybe you should go back to the countryside. It's much brighter there." "If you love the sun that much," Grace Zhao said with a cold smirk, "I'll buy you 2 train tickets back home. You can bask in all the sunlight you want there. Maybe it'll even cure all your little ailments." The 2 old carters froze on the spot. After that, no matter what tricks they tried, crying, feigning illness, throwing tantrums, none of it worked. Grace wasn't me. She didn't tolerate nonsense. The arguments in that house grew louder and nastier by the day. Ethan Carter was caught in the middle, utterly exhausted. In the end, the Institute's administration had to step in again. They reasoned quite sensibly that a newly married couple needed privacy and shouldn't have to live with their parents. The old folks should be more understanding and go back home. The Carters were furious, hurling curses about their unfilial son the whole way. But eventually, they had no choice but to leave, politely escorted right back to their hometown. After they were gone, Ethan's days didn't get any easier. He had to send money home regularly to support his parents, but Grace flatly refused to allow it. And honestly, even in my previous life, when they were doing much better financially, they never spent a single penny of their own on those old leeches. Every cent had come from me. Those shameless people even had the audacity to say, "Ethan left you a home. You should be grateful to take care of us." Just thinking about it made my stomach churn. Now that they no longer had me, their walking wallet, they weren't as well off as they used to be. It would be years before Ethan's patents could be commercialized for profit. Grace, meanwhile, constantly complained she didn't have enough money for her own luxuries. New clothes, beauty cream, fancy trinkets. So of course, she wasn't about to spend a dime supporting 2 elderly strangers. She kept Ethan's salary passbook locked tight in her hands, down to the last cent. Even then, she still grumbled that his parents were a burden. And Ethan? He could only tiptoe around her, terrified that she'd throw another tantrum and go tattling to the higher-ups at the Institute. That's when he started remembering his good old days with me. He regretted everything. He began asking around about me in secret, where I lived, where I walked, and then he'd appear along my route, pretending to bump into me by coincidence. But unlike the hollow, weary man before me, I was radiant. No longer a live-in maid working for free, no longer spending every penny I earned to feed his family, no longer staying up all night sewing or doing side work to make ends meet, no longer carrying the weight of a household that was never really mine. My skin glowed, my smile returned. For the first time, I looked alive. Ethan's gaze followed me with a twisted mix of regret, longing, and something darker. An obsessive desire to reclaim what he'd lost. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. After another huge fight with Grace, he got drunk out of his mind and staggered to my dorm, collapsing against the door. "Maya," he slurred, crying messily. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. Grace is nothing but a vicious woman. She's not even worth one of your fingers. Please wait for me. Wait for me to divorce her. I'll come back to you. We'll remarry, and I'll treat you right this time." I stared at his tear-streaked, pitiful face and felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sadness, not even anger. Only irritation that he was blocking my way. "Move," I said flatly. "You're in my way." He froze, stunned, as if he couldn't comprehend the coldness in my voice. Just then, the Institute's car, sent to take me to the train station, pulled up outside. Ethan's eyes darted to my suitcase by the door and the crisp university transfer letter in my hand, stamped with a bright red seal. His face went pale. You're leaving?" I didn't answer. I picked up my suitcase, walked around him, and headed straight for the car without looking back. He stumbled after me, swaying unsteadily, but all he could do was watch helplessly as I stepped into the car. The engine started. The car rolled forward, leaving him behind in a swirl of dust. At that moment, he must have finally realized, the woman he had taken for granted, the one who'd always waited no matter how deeply he hurt her, was gone for good. Before I left, I used my left hand to write an anonymous letter to the higher authorities. In it, I gave a clear, detailed report on Comrade Grace Zhao's behavior. The anonymous letter I'd written included every detail: that Grace Zhao had once lived abroad, had been deported back to China, and that her real reason for returning was far from what she claimed. Grace had always told people she gave up a comfortable life overseas out of love for Ethan Carter, that she couldn't bear to be apart from him. But in truth, she hadn't been able to get a permanent residence permit. She was deported. And in that particular era, such a history was a fatal stain. Even if the final investigation didn't prove anything serious, for someone like Ethan, a researcher working in a highly classified government project, the mere hint of suspicion was enough to ruin him. No higher authority would ever again trust him with access to sensitive materials. It didn't take long before the official order came down. Ethan Carter was removed from his core research position and reassigned to a small local chemical plant in his hometown, as nothing more than an ordinary production technician. The glory was gone, the privileges were gone, and their lives plummeted overnight. His parents, who had once strutted around the village bragging about their brilliant son, no longer dared to show their faces. Ethan, consumed by bitterness, blamed Grace for ruining his future. And when he learned that she hadn't returned for love at all, but because she'd been deported, he nearly lost his mind with regret. All his guilt turned to hatred. He couldn't stand the sight of her. But Grace, proud and self-centered as ever, refused to wallow in poverty by his side. She started venting her frustration on his aging parents, tormenting them with petty cruelty, shouting, throwing things, forcing them to hand over their small savings. Eventually, she began secretly hoarding that money, planning to run away and leave them all behind. But before she could escape, word got out. The Carter relatives tracked her down and caught her on the road. In the heated struggle that followed, Ethan, blind with rage and despair, shoved her hard. Grace lost her footing, screamed, and tumbled down a steep hillside. By sheer bad luck, she broke her spine. Her lower body was completely paralyzed. From that moment on, no one was going anywhere. Grace was bedridden, her temper turning more vicious by the day. Whenever anything upset her, even the smallest inconvenience, she would threaten to report Ethan for attempted murder. Ethan's parents no longer had the dignity they once carried. The proud old couple who had once looked down on me now had to serve Grace like frightened servants, feeding her, cleaning her waist, enduring her constant screaming and insults. Time passed, and soon the new year arrived. With all the preparations for the family's ancestral rituals, the house was bustling with visitors. Everyone was busy, and for once, no one came immediately to tend to Grace. From her bed, her shrill voice cut through the noise. "You useless old hag, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? You want me to rot here so you can go fetch that good daughter-in-law of yours back, huh? Let me tell you, over my dead body." The venom in her words was thick and sharp. Ethan's mother, clutching an enamel chamber pot, rushed to her bedside, trembling under Grace's hateful glare. She bent down carefully, hands shaking, and held the pot in place to help her. Then she set it aside, reaching to pull the blanket back over Grace's legs. But Grace, who had been seething with rage all day, suddenly exploded. Taking advantage of the old woman's bent posture, she grabbed the chamber pot in both hands and screamed, "Let's see how slow you are now." With a loud splash, the enamel chamber pot tipped forward. Most of the foul, black, still warm urine spilled straight down, drenching the old woman's graying hair, her face, her shoulders, soaking through the thin, faded cotton coat she wore. The stench spread instantly, sour and bitter, clinging to the air. The pot clattered to the floor, rolling until it hit the far wall with a hollow clang. Ethan's mother froze where she stood, motionless. She didn't even lift a trembling hand to wipe her face. She just stood there as the filthy liquid trickled down her wrinkled cheeks and dripped onto the cold, hard floor. I sometimes wonder in that moment, did she remember? Did she remember me? How I once cared for her for more than a decade, day after day, year after year, with patience, devotion, and not a single complaint. It took her several seconds before she finally moved, slowly lifting her hand to touch her wet face. Her figure, hunched and frail beneath the dim light, stood in stark contrast to the bed behind her, where Grace Zhao lay smirking triumphantly, her paralyzed body twisted and grotesque in satisfaction. The scene was so absurdly horrific it could have been a painting, one that reeked of decay and despair. Ethan's father stood at the doorway, having seen everything. His weathered hands shook as he slammed his pipe against the doorframe. The brittle sound echoed, a sharp crack, as the wooden bowl broke and fell onto the frozen dirt floor. Then wordlessly, the old man shuffled forward, trembling but resolute. He didn't reach for his wife. Instead, he walked straight to the bedside, picked up a soft pillow, and, using every last ounce of strength in his thin, quivering arms, pressed it down firmly over Grace Zhao's face, cutting off her screaming mid-word. Years later, I had long since built a new life for myself in another city, a bright, bustling one, far removed from that suffocating past. Who said Ethan Carter was the only one capable of becoming an expert? Once I broke free from every chain and fought my own way forward, I proved I could shine just as fiercely. One day, I was invited back to the old research institute to give an academic lecture. As I stepped through the front gate, a frail figure suddenly rushed out of the crowd toward me. He was disheveled, his hair gray and matted, his clothes tattered and patched. His face was worn and hollow, like that of a forgotten ghost. He reached out, trembling, trying to grab my arm. The security guards reacted immediately, stepping in to restrain him, but even as they pulled him back, he shouted hoarsely, "Maya! It's me! It's Ethan! Don't you recognize me?" I frowned and stopped walking. For a moment, I just stared at him, studying the clouded, lifeless eyes that searched my face with desperation. And then, only then, did I catch a faint, broken trace of the man he once was. Who would have thought that this frail, withered stranger was the same man who, in another lifetime, had stood at my funeral, tall, handsome, and surrounded by glory? When he saw me looking, his eyes widened with wild joy. "I remember now," he babbled, words tumbling over themselves. "I remember everything. We had a son, so smart he got into Qingbei, and I was an expert too. We had such a good life, everything was perfect." I looked at him quietly, at that twisted, desperate face. So he remembered. He'd brought those old memories back with him, memories of a life built atop my bones, my sacrifice, my blood and tears. A small, cold smile tugged at my lips. "Oh," I said softly, "your son got into Qingbei and you became a renowned expert? That sounds wonderful." Then I tilted my head slightly and asked, still calm, "But tell me, Ethan, in that beautiful, perfect world of yours, who was I?" The joy froze on his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Because in that version of his past, his glorious, spotless memory, the woman who had given everything, who had quietly faded away in the name of devotion and duty, was nothing. Just a nameless shadow, a silent backdrop in the story of his success. How pitiful. Grace Zhao, Ethan Carter, neither of you will ever understand. In this world, no one is born to be anyone's background.